Hey, welcome back to the Hometown Hustle podcast, and today we are talking to Home Inspector Extraordinaire Roger Owen of Superior Inspections, located here in Southern Oregon. Now, Roger is what I like to refer to as a home inspection nerd because he literally lives, eats, and breathes this stuff. Now, Roger is fascinated by how things work, and despite having decades of experience building homes, he is constantly on the hunt to learn more so that he can better help his clients. Hope you enjoy. Let's check it out. Howdy, Roger.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
I know we've kind of been chatting and laughing here for a minute, but I just can't tell how excited I am to have you on here. You've been a friend of mine for a long time. I've known you since I first got started in the real estate industry. I think you've done one of my first inspections. And I think you and I kind of got into this, at least on the inspection side, kind of at the same time. So we've kind of grown up in the business a little bit.
Right.
So I just think it's really cool having you here. And of course, we're here with none other than Mr. Dan Doyle, who you've known for a long time, and all that from, Dan Doyle from Nation's Lending. Got to get it out. And of course, my partner in crime over here, Mr. Robyn Lasky.
Yes.
So, yeah. Happy to have you here. We've been trying to hit the different industries in the real estate world and to talk about some things, that maybe misconceptions people have or just some ways to help, consumers in the market, buyers and sellers, and maybe even some other real estate agents. And so happy to have you on here and have you share your expertise.
Well, thank you. It's good to be on here. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I don't know, probably a couple years or whatever it's been, but yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, cool. So for anybody who doesn't know you that's watching, just give us a brief overview of kind of just who you are, your background in home inspection and construction and all that, just for reference. So when we get to talking, people understand where it is that you're coming from. So
I am Roger Owen. As Daniel said, company is Superior Inspections. I've been doing inspections for probably 8 years now. And that has come as an extension of basically what I've done most of my life. I became a licensed contractor in the state of Oregon in 1989, did finish work, and at that time I was working for a contractor and we did a lot of homes, built a lot of homes down in Medford. So that gave me the opportunity to watch and see construction from the breaking of the ground to the people moving, getting their key and getting them go in the house. Mm-hmm. So that afforded me the ability to see all stages, all steps of construction. Even though I was just doing finished carpentry, I like to pay attention to everything else that's going on. I like to ask questions. I like to just observe. I mostly observe. Mm-hmm. And that really prepared me for years down the road when I started doing inspections. It gave me a background to be able to do that. It was interesting. I thought that since I'd been a contractor for so long, I thought I could roll over and do inspections pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Until I got up to Salem and took the test the first time.
The first time.
Then I realized, wow, there is a lot more, and it's you come at so many things from a different angle. So I had to do a lot of studying, and I went back up to Salem to take a couple of those tests again.
Wow.
A couple, huh?
So, a couple of them. I think there's 5 or something. Interestingly enough, when I got up
there... You didn't fail 5 times. There's 5 different tests.
There's 5 different tests.
Yeah. Okay.
Interestingly enough, 8 or 9 years ago when I went up there, they handed me packets of paper, a number 2 pencil, and several erasers.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we've had computers for a while. And they hand me these packets of paper, and I had to wait like 2 weeks for the results.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like if this was in the computer, I could know by the time I walked out of here. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's when I learned.
Is it still like that, do you know?
I do not know.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know, because when I got my license, I remember one of the funny things about when I got my license is I finished the test and there's like this big buildup to they tell you that you're going to know right when you're done. And so there's like this big buildup, click submit. And then so you're like, okay, I'm like, did I do it? And you're click submit. And then it's like, fill out this brief survey. And you're like, oh, okay. Totally delays you. And so you have to fill out this survey. And then it's and then you're like, okay, submit survey, and then it's like, are you sure you want to submit? It's like, right?
Doesn't do it again too. Like,
well, it's like you expect to press submit, and then like confetti and fireworks pop out of the back of the machine, like you did it,
Right.
But it's just like it has like the big logo of like the real estate agency logo or whatever, and then you have to like read all the fine text. It doesn't say like congrats or like anything. It's just very super subtle, and you're like, where is it? So
wow,
anyway.
I absolutely hated that. The whole test thing was horrible.
Yeah.
I do not take tests well.
I don't either.
It was not fun. I was in there for hours.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
sorry, no, it
it's
takes a long time. I remember going through it going through it so quick that I thought I made a mistake. That I was like, oh, I messed something up.
Wow.
But I passed. So.
Well, and the problem with some of our tests were they were the tests that they had originally come up with when they started licensing inspectors.
Right.
So there was questions in there about boilers.
Wow.
I'm like, I don't inspect boilers. I mean, if there's a boiler in a house, I'm going to have you call somebody that does inspect them, know. But there was questions about boilers. So, yeah, everybody asked me, did you fail the HVAC one? I'm like, yep. I think everybody fails that one. And that's part of the reason why is you're studying modern equipment and they ask you questions about ancient equipment.
Right.
So anyway, past all that.
I think the tests are always designed to trip you up. Unfortunately, especially the
Feels
real
like
estate one. Just the way that they word the question, you're like, wait, practically that makes no sense. But what are you looking for on the answers? So we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you got started.
Then I got started.
Yeah.
That's always interesting, getting started.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
Yeah. What was that process like for you when you first started, like taking the test and then actually like doing your first inspection? I mean, what did that feel like? Because at least for me, I remember like the real estate exam, and then you like go and like you try to figure out, like you show up to your first day, at the real estate. It's just like, I don't know what to do. They don't prepare you for that. Yeah, it's super awkward.
Super awkward.
And they don't prepare you for anything that happens during the transaction either.
No.
On the real estate stuff. So you have to like figure that stuff out.
Right.
But,
yeah, the first inspection, what takes me typically 2 hours on site now and then several hours in the office compiling a report. I think I was all day on the first inspection, and I had my computer there, and I'm going through all these lists of things, and instead of when I walk around now, I can basically walk through a room once and I'm looking at the walls, I'm looking at the ceiling, I'm feeling the floor with my feet, I'm checking the electrical, I'm turning the light on and off, check the window. I do all that at once. Well, back then, I think I was literally doing one thing at a time, and it was taking forever.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Absolutely forever. I'm sure I was frustrating the real estate agent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so super awkward.
Yeah.
Learn a lot from that first one, right?
Sure.
Your first transaction, you learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that Robyn has, I think, a very similar story in which he went to go fill out his first offer, and there's a cover sheet in the forms, the zip forms thing that we have to fill out, and so he went through and like, okay, I have to fill all this out, and like the cover sheet covers
Everything,
all kinds of stuff that you don't need.
Right.
Like, and so I remember he called me like 3 hours later, or I called him 3 hours later, and I'm like, how did that go? And he's like, I'm still here writing it. I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you still writing that thing?
Yeah.
Like it literally takes me 20 minutes to write one now.
Right.
But I remember when I first got started too, it literally took damn near 2 hours and 2 or 3 hours to get it done.
I lost those clients too, by the way.
Because
but
it took you 3 hours to write the contract.
I think it was more than that, but it was a lot of the same.
Yeah, because
basic idea.
You don't know what you don't need, you know, and so you they tell you, oh, this is what I want to do, and you're like, okay, and then you go and then you get into the offer, and you're like, oh, I need to know whether they want this, or I need to know whether they want that, or and so you do that, you call your clients back 5 or 6 times, they start to realize that you don't have any idea what you're doing.
Well, exactly.
That same contract, you ended up coming back to the office and helping me out with it because I was there for so long, and this was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Right.
He came back to the office to help me out, and then we had to call the clients to go over it, and I had my phone on
Speaker.
on mute, and then Daniel would tell me what to say, and I'd unmute it, and I'd say it.
Oh, wow.
And then they'd ask a question, I'd mute it. Daniel would answer me, I'd unmute it. Like you just had to be obvious. Like they had to be like, what is wrong with this guy?
Is this a telemarketing call?
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, you lost those clients, but Dan didn't. He actually closed that loan later.
He told me about it later. He's like, just so you know.
Happens. Yeah. Hey, it is what it is.
Didn't upset me at all. I felt like it was a learning experience. I learned a lot.
All of it's a learning experience.
It's all good.
And I don't like beating anybody up because we all had to start, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no,
sure.
yeah.
We all had to start.
We all had those same issues the first time, so it's all good.
So, Roger, from that first inspection and going through the house, have you refined your process flow pretty well? I mean, do you know when you're walking up to a house where you're going to start, or is it new every time?
Oh, no. I know exactly where I'm going to start. For me, it needs to be super methodical, so I don't miss anything.
Right.
And so when I show up to the house, I'll typically go from the front door and I'll go counterclockwise on the outside of the house. And that's my time. I'm really looking at everything. I'm taking it in. I'm taking pictures. Basically, I take pictures instead of notes. Then I grab my clipboard and I go to the same starting place, but I go the opposite direction. It's very interesting learning about human nature and psychology and what you have to do to make sure you don't miss anything. You guys all do the same thing. Your double checks, whatever it is. This is mine. So I go around the opposite direction. I draw the house. I make notes, marks, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Climb up on the roof. Then when I head inside, I go to the kitchen and I'll put my equipment down on the counter. I'll go back to the front door, and I'm looking at the front door from the inside, and I will start with my right hand, and I'll just literally make my way through the entire house, upstairs, downstairs, excluding the kitchen. The kitchen I leave as a separate entity. I've got my stuff I want to do in there. So very, very methodical on how I do it. That way I'm also able to, if I need to stop, if the clients show up, if somebody asks me a question, I can stop. I know where I am in a bedroom. I know everything I've done, everything I still have to do. I can come back, talk to them, go back and resume what I've been doing. So the nice thing about that is if somebody wants to know when to show up, if an agent wants to know when to show up with the buyers, I can tell them, I can usually tell within 10 minutes of me completing an inspection. So it makes it nice for everybody. I don't like to waste other people's time. You know, I don't want you to have to come and then you're waiting for me for 45 minutes to finish up.
Yeah.
So makes it nice.
I don't even know how many inspections we've done. And every time you tell me to show up, it's like you're literally either coming out of the crawl space with your hazmat suit on, right, or you're just about to go in,
right?
Right, like it's clockwork,
right? Yeah,
yeah, it's clockwork every time, and that's like one thing that I've encouraged buyers to do is not bother you like during the inspection, like let you go through your process because you are so methodical,
right? And
like any sort of like little interruption or conversation in that is just more opportunity for you to miss something.
It is,
right? And so that's why I've always encouraged people, like, let's come at the end. At that time, he'll have something to talk to you about,
right?
He can tell you about this, he can tell you about that, and then and then we can be on our way. And then you'll get the report, and you've already had a conversation with him, so you'll understand what you're seeing on the report. And so it's a good thing for people to do is to come at the end when you're finished.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Otherwise, asking questions that you haven't even seen what you're looking at yet, I mean, is counterproductive. Yeah.
Well, it really is, and there's so many things that tie together. The plumbing might all look great until I climb in the crawl space. I'm very methodical on the way I do that. I run all of the water when I'm in the house. I go in the crawl space last so that I know the water was run through all the lines. If it's leaking, I'm going to find that out when I get down there. If I go in the crawl space before I've tested the water,
right,
there could have been a leak that I didn't get to see. So, all that makes a difference.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing. I mean, I know you had a process, but it's interesting hearing like what your actual process is, because I know that you're thorough. But it just makes me feel better when I hear that you have like this entire process and that you do it the same way every time.
Right.
Because that just leads to consistency, right? Like
it does.
Consistency in your reports. And I think that with that being said, there's probably been times, I'm not going to say probably, there definitely has been times where we've had clients that maybe are disappointed because they move into the house and they find something that maybe you didn't find or something like that.
Yes.
And I think that that's a common misconception. And one of the things that I want to talk about is like what you can do and what you can't do, or what you do inspect and what you don't inspect, because that is a very big misconception between, for buyers and probably real estate agents alike. Right.
Right.
And so, talk a little bit about that too. just in hopes that people kind of understand that you can't see everything. You're not going to see everything as much as as good as your process is, and as hard as you try, it's just not going to happen.
Especially if it's occupied and there's furniture.
Right. Yeah. Or somebody's sleeping under the electrical box or something. We're going to share that story.
Yes, for sure. An occupied house there's going to be stuff that cannot be seen. I'm thinking of one specifically that I had done, and there was like 4 or 5 disappointments on the part of the buyer, and they were all things that literally I couldn't see, I couldn't know because of the boxes that were packed for moving and whatnot were there. All their personal items were there. I simply couldn't see them. So that is a disappointment. So, of course, the more ready a house is for me when I get there, that's better, of course, for the buyer.
Yeah. So that's a great tip, right? So that's like real estate agents, like if you're going to have a home inspection, if you're the listing agent, if you're the buyer's agent, it's important to inform those buyers and sellers that those things need to be done.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
Well, I think we should also talk about invasive versus non-invasive and what that means when you're doing an inspection.
Right.
People don't understand the difference in the terminology for that.
True, and we'll get there in just a second. One note I was going to say on what you said, Daniel, is for sure at least give me access to the electrical panel, and I need to pretty much be able to walk up to it without a bunch of stuff underneath it, because I'm pulling that panel off. There's 240 volts behind the cover, and I just need to make sure that I'm not slipping, I'm not moving. I need to have a good firm footing when I'm doing that. Access to the heating and cooling system, primarily the air handler, if it's in the garage, attic, or whatnot. That's pretty much everybody knows that's like an $8,000 to $12,000 or $15,000 system, and so it is important that I look in there. Am I going to be able to diagnose everything? Well, again, that's not actually my job. My job is to look at it, look at dates, see if there's issues, and then report that so we can get an HVAC tech out to look at it. But if I can't get into it, then that's an expensive system that really wasn't tested. I will run the heating, I will run the cooling, whichever I can do, but there could be other issues related to that I might not see if I can't get in the air handler. So electrical panel, air handler, those are the biggest ones. Water heater, if I can get to it, if it's wrapped with insulation, okay, it's wrapped with insulation. Sometimes I can peek in there and at least see a nomenclature tag and whatnot. Yeah. And then other things are less important, but yeah, access is important.
And speaking of access too, like crawl space access is often incredibly limited.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes you have this much room to wiggle through, which even if you can wiggle through it, you're not going to be able to like move your eyes around and like look at the understructure and all that.
Right.
So it's just reasonable for people need to just realize that it's nearly impossible to see everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And attic access as well. Often those are they're in a closet. You have a shelf that's not very far from the ceiling, and then there's the access. That can get difficult. Cars in the garage, other stuff underneath it, if it's a pull-down ladder, those types of things. That would be really helpful and beneficial for the buyer.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, if you're done with that, let's move on to the invasive and non-invasive.
And so what these inspections, these type of inspections are called, they're actually called a visual inspection. So in theory, you could put your hands in your pocket and literally walk around and look at everything. Now,
who determines that they're visual inspections?
That's just been the term. It's been called for a long time.
Because there's a governing body that...
Well, yeah, there's the state of Oregon for sure.
Okay.
And then I am a member of the American Society of Home Inspectors, and that's the standards of practice that I follow. Okay. You need to have a standards of practice, right? Otherwise, you're not going to have any consistency. You're not going to have a standard to fall back on. So I went with the oldest one in our nation, and I went with ASHI, American Society of Home Inspectors. So inspections obviously have evolved, as most things do. And of course, they're having to change as we have new materials, et cetera, et cetera. And so the moment I take my little tester and test an outlet, that is now no longer a visual inspection. I have done something beyond visual. So a lot of what I do is beyond visual. That's why it's really important to adhere to a standards of practice.
Right.
Now, if I choose to, I can state that I will go beyond that, which I try to do either in the contract or either in the text above each section in the report. One of the things that is obviously important is to test for moisture levels, especially in the floor around toilets or in front of showers. Extremely important. What I use is a non-evasive moisture meter. I have a pinless type. Yeah, it's I think $550, $650 last time I checked, but I'm not poking holes in anything. And if there's moisture, we can tell. And there's often moisture. That's a very common place to have moisture. Something we need to know.
Right. Especially if it's squishy.
Yeah, we talked to Debbie Washburn, a local appraiser, and when she goes to a property, she literally straddles the toilet and she'll push on both sides.
Yep.
And then she'll know whether or not there's something that needs to be done.
Yep.
On every appraisal.
Yep.
Very smart. I step on each side and I'll grab the toilet with my knees and I'll rock it back and forth to see if it's loose.
It's obviously a common
Oh yeah, the wax
problem.
ring
Yes.
deterioration.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So beyond that, as you referred to, we'd love to be able to see everything earlier. Yeah, it would be great. It'd be great to have a camera where we could see inside the walls and everything, but we can't.
Right.
There's wiring inside the walls. There's plumbing inside the walls. There could be
Insulation.
rodents inside the walls.
Yeah.
We don't know. So there's a line in some of, like the plumbing and the electrical that says not all was inspected due to lack of accessibility. And that's, in the walls, in the floors, in the ceiling. I just can't see it.
Yeah.
If I can kind of what I do is I'm looking for the little thing that might lead me to something bigger and something bigger. I'm the detective, I'm looking for the little hair.
You're looking for the clue.
Yep, I'm looking for the clue. And so I will dig as much as I can, but it will get to a point where I will have to say, here's what I found. We need to call a professional.
Right. It could be this, it could be that, but
Right.
you really need to call a pro.
You do.
Right.
And I honestly don't have the permission, from the owner of the structure. I don't have their permission to go tearing things up. I mean, this is still literally their house.
Right.
I'm an invited guest, so I have to act like an invited guest.
Right. Yep. No, it's true. It's people don't like that sometimes, but that is what it is. It's
Well, I mean, on that vein of it, I've had transactions where it's closed and clearly the sellers have made something appear different than it was. I've had folks that had rodent problems so bad in the walls that they've literally done, the car freshener air hangers. They've literally removed stuff like, the medicine cabinets in a bathroom, shoved those in there, and then put the medicine cabinet back into a bathroom to not have a smell for the rodent problem. How are you going to find that as an inspector?
I won't.
Exactly.
I can't.
Right.
yeah.
But the first call that I get is, do you have a copy of our home inspection? And the answer is hell no. We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But the reality is no, I'm sorry. How are they supposed to know behind the walls?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I hate that question after the fact, like a couple months after the transaction. Can you send us a copy of the home inspection?
Yeah.
Right.
Why?
Why? Am I in trouble? Is Roger in trouble? Who's in trouble?
Who's in trouble?
What's happening here?
Yep.
Yeah, I hate that one. Yeah. It happens very rarely with you, but it is one of those things that it's happened before.
Yes, it has.
And you're not the only inspector that's had that happen.
Nope.
For sure. So
No, if you've done this for any length of time, you have had this happen.
yeah, and it's just I think a lot of it is misunderstandings and maybe just people's expectations and things like that. It's not.
Well, and you have to
their
point
fault.
the finger at somebody.
Do you?
Well, they do. They want to.
They want to.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have to.
When you pull something away and you see something you didn't see before, and you're like, someone's fault. Who's going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a transaction close late last year that you inspected, actually, but they were so reasonable about it. it wasn't even funny, and it was a major repair that you possibly couldn't have seen, and it very well could have happened after you were even done with your inspection in the first place. But they moved in, and they noticed that the floor in the master closet, like behind all people's stuff usually, had a little bit of moisture to it, and come to find out that they had some leaking pipes behind the wall, like one of them burst or something like that, and they had to go. I can't remember why exactly, but they had to go and repipe the whole thing. Like it wasn't just something that they could like fix. Like there was something about the piping that was bad.
Right.
Like, but you would never have known. And I think they ended up getting it worked out, but they also were like very reasonable about it. Like there's no way he would have seen this. It's possible that it happened after the fact. Right. And the sellers actually ended up chipping in and like and helping them have it repaired also, which I thought was pretty cool. So, but no, I want people to be more reasonable, as I hope, just have some more common sense,
Right.
I had one where there was a refrigerator in the garage, and then after they moved out, the refrigerator was gone, and behind there was just a bunch of mold. Mm-hmm. And they wanted, even after we closed, it was like a week after we closed, the agent called me up and wanted the seller to pay for it.
Yeah.
And the seller said no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And then that was the end of it, but it was just definitely not comfortable.
You can't see it through a refrigerator.
No, you can't. And they're always shoved up against the wall, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. If we were all reasonable without having to get emotions and get all worked up, most things could be worked out a lot simpler.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably one of the things that I want to see changed in the industry. It's just people just let's all act like adults and just be a little more professional here and just be reasonable.
Right.
Try to look at things from both sides instead of just your selfish opinion.
Yeah. Right. The difficulty is we have so many buyers that are getting into the market right now that are literally putting their last dollar into that house. Then when something goes south, despite me saying, don't put your last dollar into this house. Let's give you some breathing room. And everybody's like, what's the max I can get, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I tell them the average consumer goes into $19,000 in debt the first year that they buy a home.
Wow.
$19,000. And so if they're begging, stealing, and borrowing to just even make it, right, then when something like that happens, they instant panic mode because they didn't have any reserves.
Yeah. And then that's when they go and try to point the finger.
Right. Exactly. Correct. Right. This is somebody else's fault. This is not mine because I tapped out my reserves.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
We're not going to change humanity, guys.
No,
but we can
we're
really
not.
help improve the home inspection process.
Yeah. So
You
speaking,
have to be the change.
you have to be the change you wish to see in the world. Is that the one, Lasky? You bringing that
Something
one
like
back?
that.
Yeah. You bringing back one of your famous quotes.
It's a good one.
It's
solid.
The other bald guy said it. Gandhi, not you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said a lot of better things.
A lot of better things.
Better things than I said.
Better things than you say. Yeah. All right. You didn't write anything down in your questionnaire, but I know you got one at least. What is one of the weirdest things that you've ever seen during a home inspection? Maybe just something you came across, something that was very unusual. And I'm not, it could be, and we already mentioned the person sleeping under the electrical panel, so you couldn't get into that one. Just the random. Yeah.
Yeah, he got into it.
Oh,
did you straddle him like the toilet?
No, I don't know
with
what
your
I did.
knees. I don't know what I did.
Which one was that?
It was the.
We can't say.
We can't say. I was right there with you, Danny.
It was fairly recently,
Right.
and there's tenants in the house.
In the proximity of the high school.
Right.
It's you guys. Golly. Anyway,
I remember pulling up to this one, and this guy is in a wheelchair. I believe it was winter. He was in it. He had his wheelchair there, but he was laying on
That one was one of mine too.
the driveway,
I remember this as well.
and he needed to go to the bathroom.
Yep.
Number 2. So he went right there, and then he's just laying right there on the driveway, and I worked around him.
He eventually got up and left.
He did, yeah. I just kind of worked around him. I mean, he was cold, and he was
homeowner or
Homeless.
homeless
can't
dude.
Yeah. Just,
wrap my mind around this.
so there was
defecated.
just a gentleman who was homeless that was sleeping in the carport.
Oh,
basically.
so it wasn't one of your clients?
No.
No,
Okay,
no.
thank God.
I was thinking it was like the cellar or something.
No, but he had a wheelchair. He couldn't get around. He had a wheelchair.
Yeah, and he had a bag that.
Stop.
Yeah. Stop.
And Dan needs to use hand sanitizer. I can't touch anything.
Your OCD is so funny. I love it. Your germies.
Is it OCD or is it CDO? So it's at least in alphabetical order.
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
times 10.
It's clinical is what it is.
Right.
Fair enough.
Pretty funny. Sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to remind you that if you're enjoying the podcast, please hit that like, subscribe, and notification button. It is the best way to support the channel, and without your support, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you, and let's get back to it. Yeah.
Have you ever had any squatters chilling in a house that you weren't prepared for?
Well, first of all, I'm always prepared.
Touche. We like the hat.
NRA, baby.
No, I don't think I've had that.
No.
I don't think I've had that.
Man, that would be my biggest concern about walking through a house. I don't touch light switches. Talking about the OCD, I don't touch light switches or door handles.
Right.
So that would be.
You'd have
problem.
a real problem with this.
Yeah, I'd
You'd have
probably-
3 of those gloves on, right?
I would for sure, and a little squirt of hand sanitizer next to me.
Right.
After every light switch he touched.
No, I'd use my shirt like I always do.
Yeah. Elbow.
Then you touch your shirt.
Yeah.
You're funny, dude. I love it.
Plumbing. I think that the thing that I come across the most often is plumbing.
Yeah.
And it's the drain underneath the sink went bad over the weekend. The homeowners went down to Home Depot or wherever and got some parts and put underneath there, and they're not plumbers, so they don't quite know what the configuration is supposed to look like, what the materials are supposed to be, and so that's probably what I run across the most. I have a lot of pictures of those.
A lot of pictures, funny
Yeah.
stuff.
Frogs, mostly frogs, sometimes lizards in the electrical panels.
Oh.
Yeah, they reach over and they touch both of those lines that come in.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that little tiny animal getting 240 volts. Yeah.
Connecting that arc. Woo.
Yeah. So all you see is just this dried out.
Could that start a fire?
I don't know that it could start a fire in the panel. Squirrels up on the power lines have started fires up on the power lines.
I'm pretty sure a squirrel got blasted on my power line outside my house one day because we were outside and it was just like, whoop,
Right?
it's like, what the heck was that? I'm pretty sure that's what
Probably
that
a
was.
squirrel.
Yeah.
So, since you're talking about electrical panels, let's talk about a Zinsco panel. And
Oh,
the nightmare,
yes.
Zinsco. I haven't seen a Zinsco in a while.
The nightmare that is a Zinsco panel in Grants Pass, Oregon. For some
Right.
damn reason, everybody says, nope, just has to be replaced.
Right.
$12,000 we want to credit today.
Right.
I'm going to learn something here. What's this thing?
Okay, so
panel?
Zinsco
Well,
panels.
if you were born before 19... No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I could
Zins-
identify a Zinsco panel just by opening it up. So, and I don't
Yes.
do home inspections. That's how
Common.
much of a traumatization is it? It is. Yeah.
The breakers are very unique.
Yeah.
So basically, Zinsco panels and Federal Pacific, the stab locks, basically they're in the same category. So, first of all, there is a life to panels, to breakers. They're dealing with a lot of power, a lot of amperage, and over time, all of that does weaken the contacts inside there, mostly copper, but there's definitely aluminum involved. Zinsco panels have aluminum bus bars. And so all of that does weaken. So there is a life to them. You know, every 50 years or so, honestly, you should have your panel taken out and a new panel put in. Now, do we do that? Well, not really. But when it comes to Zinsco and Federal Pacific, I've got to the point in the last year where I'm just calling them and just saying they need to be replaced. Part of the reason, there's several reasons. Reason number one, a 20 amp breaker for a Zinsco breaker might break at 50 amps. Not 20, not 21, not 22, 50. And so you have a number 12 wire hooked to that, and a number 12 wire is not made to have 50 amps going through it. You know, you've got a short in your outdoor unit, you've got, you know, a short or something going on with your water heater, and you're drawing all this amperage through a number 12 wire. Now, if you want to get super technical, a number 12 wire could actually handle that kind of amperage. The issue is at the connections at both ends of the wire. They loosen up over the time. They didn't get tightened up in the first place, and you begin to get arcing. Those sparks in those arcs are about 1,500 degrees, and if there's dust, if there's combustibles around it, it can start fires.
Or a frog.
Or a frog. Right.
/lizard.
So does it happen? Yes, it does. So what I then do is I start looking at the insulation that's been stripped at the wire right at the breaker. If I start seeing that insulation has been melted back, I will definitely call it. Mm-hmm. If I don't see that, as I've said in about the last year, I've started to call it. Reason number 2, a Zinc, most of our modern breakers, you put the breaker in sideways, it kind of clicks in, and then you push it onto the bus bar. It's locked in both mechanically and against that bus bar. So some of the Zinsco breakers actually have, there's a double bus bar system, and you just basically push the breaker onto the bus bar. There's a spring behind the contact in the breaker that holds that in place. And so literally all that's holding that in place is that spring. There's been guys that have taken the front panel off and all the breakers will just fall to the bottom.
Wow.
That's how lightly they're being held in there. So if that's the case, we're getting arcing, we're getting heat. There's been times where guys have pulled those off and the bus bar is just gone from all the arcing over all the years. It's literally gone. Mm-hmm. So anymore, yeah, I realize it's $2,000, whatever, to get a panel changed, but in the interest of safety, really, it should be done.
It has to happen.
It should be done.
Yeah. No, we had just recently a home inspector called out on one of my listings. It was it didn't have a main breaker shut off.
Yes.
Do you see that a lot too?
Yes. So that's another thing, a good point of clarification. So in the old days, we wanted 6 actions to be able to turn off all the power to the house. Say the fire, you have a fire going on, the firemen show up. They don't want to have to shut off every single breaker. So in the old days, we had the 6 breakers on top, 3 on each side, were 240 volt breakers. One of them serviced everything underneath. Mm-hmm. So you could turn in 6 actions, you could turn off all the power to that house. Then we moved to a single breaker, typically a 200 amp breaker, on top or bottom that would turn off all the power. So the whole 6 action thing is kind of fallen out of favor now. We're really liking, for the purpose of safety again, a single action. Just go in there and shut that thing off. Another issue that comes into play is some people on those 6 breakers on top, they'll take out one of the 240 volt breakers and put in 2 120 volt breakers, because a lot of our electrical needs, the power is diminishing. We don't need as much power, so you don't have any room down here. So you come up there. Oh, I'll split this one and put 2. Well, now you have 7 actions, so that's not actually within the scope of what it should be anymore.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So on occasion, I'm not stating that those ones with 6 actions should be replaced at this point. If it's more than 6 actions, I will. If the panels start to look bad, it looks like a rat's nest in there. Mm-hmm. There's been 10 people working in there over the years. I will say that it should be done.
Yeah. Yeah. My panel at my house doesn't have a main breaker either. So built in the 80s. So
right.
Probably one of those things that needs to get replaced at one of these days anyway, right? So
right.
Yeah. No.
Well, it's a crucial thing. I think people also just don't have clarity about it enough, so they just sound the alarm, right? Which is not a bad thing, but I think getting educated is a better option.
Yeah.
But that kind of happens a lot on home inspections. You read through the home inspection, you're like, Roger said that this needs to be fixed, or what do you always say? Rectified. Yeah. Like, oh my God, we have to tell them they have to pay for this. They have to fix this. And, then you have a 16-line repair addendum. And
yeah, my suggestion is always I think you just need to call Roger and just have him explain to you what it is so you get a better understanding of it. And then at that point, let's figure out where to move forward from there. But you need to have a conversation with him about what it is. He'll explain it to you in depth. I mean, as all of us just heard, Roger, you're a major home inspector nerd. So, and that's, I mean that with as much respect, and it's a
Daniel
compliment.
tuned out for half of it. That's what it means.
Well, we got about,
That's not true, because in some of my early education, I mentioned some things and Daniel still remembers it. He loves that learning. So
I do love the learning, but I will tell you about halfway through that conversation, I'm like, man, Roger is a nerd.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that point, Robin, there was a guy that I think he's out of the industry now, but he literally used skulls and crossbones on some of his documentation. Red skull and crossbones. And I'm just like, good God, I would pee myself reading this.
Yeah.
Like, let alone a home buyer that's concerned. It's you can give the information without scaring the dickens out of people.
right.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do. I try not to be scary. I try not to make a mountain out of a molehill. Yes, I'm detailed. I will have a lot of things in there, but just because there's a cracked plate at an outlet or something doesn't mean that has to be replaced. I just noticed it, so I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It's a little weekend warrior stuff. You can go to Lowe's and get Home Depot and get some of those and put them on.
I try to always tell before you go in what to expect with that just so you know, Roger is going to point out every little thing, and don't let that alarm you. It's just knowledge, and
Right.
it's better to know about it than not know about it.
Right.
That's his job.
Yeah.
And I think this is great because people can listen to this and understand more of some of the details that just can't go in the report.
Yeah.
I already have a 50-page report. I don't need a 100-page explaining all of this too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a company in town that's like notorious for like 100 and 120 page reports. It's insane.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm always just like, oh my God, when does it end?
And you know the consumer's not reading it because they can't do this.
Right.
No, that's right. Yeah. No, it's that's one thing that I found is that, I mean, I feel like that's our job as real estate brokers, is we just have to make sure that we're pointing out things that could be alarming to people because they're not paying attention to it. No.
Or they're overpaying attention to it, and everything's alarming.
Right. Yeah. It's one or the other. Yeah.
True.
So, yeah.
That's why you guys are so critical. You guys could nearly do my job. It's just that
No.
I'm not crawling under a
The
house.
scowl.
However, you did have that RC car with a camera for a while.
I still do. It rides around the back of the truck. Yeah.
Oh man, I would totally utilize that.
Yeah.
So I would literally,
Crawl spaces.
yeah, RC car down, taking pictures and camera on it.
Absolutely.
For sure. That'd be the best part.
But
of
yeah,
the
you
job.
guys are the go-between. You guys are able to communicate and explain to the buyers. You know, you're the in-between. You know, you can explain what I've said. And then like you said, Daniel, if you can't understand it from me, just call Roger.
Right.
Because I am available by phone, by text, by email for everybody I've done an inspection for.
Yeah.
Every time I've ever had anyone call you, they always talk to me afterwards, like, "Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yep.
Makes sense."
You always make people feel better about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
Well, that's part of our job, right? We're a team,
Right.
all of us, and that's part of our job, right?
Yeah.
Is to help them through it. Because this is not their world. They
Right.
live in a house,
Yeah.
but buying it is not their world. It's our world.
Yeah. Very, very much so.
Which is an awesome segue into why should somebody get a home inspection?
Great
is.
segue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Why? Why don't you just tell us a horror story about why you should get a home inspection? How about that?
Well, a couple of stories on new houses. Like why should I get an inspection on a new house, right? Everything's done. The inspectors for the city signed off. It's got to be good, right? So I had literally two things on this one house. I'm climbing underneath this really nice
This was my transaction.
acrylic bathtub in the master
This house you
bath.
bought?
No, my transaction.
You were the lender?
Yeah.
And there's a leak. The waistline is leaking on the brand new floor underneath this super nice bathtub. You know, and how long would that go before somebody? I mean, you have to literally crawl, and then there's this little access hole. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm looking in there. I'm like, need to fix that. And then the same house, the dryer duct came through the wall, maybe through the footing, and then literally never went anywhere. Just never went anywhere. And I don't blame like the HVAC guy. I don't blame the plumber. I get it. Life happens. You know, you're Friday at 2:00. Your wife calls. Your kid's on. She's on the way to the hospital because the kid just fell and broke his nose or whatever.
Right.
The guy packs up and goes and does he helps with the family and stuff. And Monday, he doesn't remember that he didn't plumb the dryer vent in.
Yeah.
He just didn't.
Or you show up and some guy's in the driveway taking a dump or something. I mean, it's just, you never know.
You gotta go. Right. I mean, there's been new constructions where a dump truck has literally crushed one of the pipes that was needed to go, like, for the French drain or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, it's the new construction, like, to me, I think it's more or just as important where people don't think so, because there's a phrase in the construction world, can't see it from my porch.
Right.
Right? So what the contractors mean is, it ain't on my house. Right. And
Right.
nothing against them, but that's the level of detail that 90% of them are putting into the house, that it's super important.
Right. And those guys, most of those guys, as you're saying, just aren't as detailed as I am. I'm looking at all of that for you. I mean, $500 for peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it worth it?
Yeah.
And it's especially on a new construction. At that, it's not going to cost you anything to get that fixed. The contractor has to warranty a home up to 1 year. So he will fix that stuff, I find, the first time. Have me in at 11 months, we'll make a list, and anything that still needs to be fixed or isn't working right, the contractor can fix by that 12th month. So it just makes sense.
Yeah. No.
Just makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I think one thing that, on the same vein, like one thing that I think as the market's starting to change and it's going to become harder to sell houses, one of the things that I've started to suggest to people is considering a pre-listing inspection.
Right.
And getting that stuff.
Talking about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And what that does is I think a lot of people think, it's just going to let us know like what's wrong with the house. But like if you go in there and you get the inspection and you fix it, it's going to make the whole process so much smoother throughout the whole thing. Like that buyer may go get their own inspection, and that's perfectly fine. And they may find stuff that maybe you didn't find or whatever, but it's just going to make the whole process a lot easier.
It will.
And the worst part about the real estate transaction, I will say hands down, the worst part about the real estate transaction is the repair negotiation period. Like it is so stressful for everybody. The buyer, the seller, both agents that are involved, it is awful. And it's just because people have expectations. The buyers obviously want to move into a perfect house. The sellers are selling it as is. They're ready to move on. And it's just, but I just think that getting that pre-listing inspection is such a huge thing to make sure that the sale goes smoothly. And I cannot recommend it enough. If you don't have the resources to make a bunch of fixes, or your house is not in that great a shape and you don't want to like do all that stuff, that's fine. I get it. But just know that it's going to be a challenge at some point. You can just get ahead of it with a pre-listing inspection.
And to me, it's the surprise factor of those big items. When we had that hot weather in February or something, I was testing an air conditioning system. I tested it multiple different ways. It didn't work, and this was a buyer's inspection. So if those people would have had a listing inspection, they would have already known that. Of course, they fixed it. They were just on it. They fixed it, but then that could have been taken care of.
Yeah.
Or the rot in the corner where the downspout's not working right, and there's rot in there, and now all of a sudden that's got to get fixed within this period of time that you guys have. Whereas if you had an inspection, found that out, fixed those major things, a lot less stressful. And if the buyers see that, they got the inspection and they did these major things, doesn't that make a buyer feel better too?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Well, Daniel, I think there becomes an issue on the listing agent side at that point, because in the state of Oregon, it's all about disclosure, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So if you get that pre-listing inspection done, then you're responsible to disclose it on the seller's property disclosures that, I think a lot of listing agents don't want that to happen.
Right.
They would rather say, unknown, NA, than saying, yes, we found out that there was rot behind that downspout. We're choosing not to do it. Good luck. Right.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that's going to get requested to be repaired.
Yeah.
Right.
But I just feel like honesty is always the best policy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right. And so,
I agree.
no, you agree. And so I know you agree. And I would bet that most buyers would appreciate that rather than even them telling like, this is what it is. Like, I did this for you. I'm still not fixing it. I'd almost think they'd appreciate that rather than they would
Trying to hide it.
moving in and then being like,
Correct.
what the hell is this?
Yeah.
You know,
I think
like,
it starts with the listing agent. That was
Yeah.
the point of my topic. Is
Sure.
it starts with the listing agent to say, hey, yes, we're going to put some things on there that we don't want to, but I would rather not see you in court when you don't do it and you try to hide it.
Right.
Like, let's just play our cards. Your house is still going to sell,
right.
or you're going to fix it.
Well, it goes back to just doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Or being reasonable, like
Being
we talked
reasonable.
about.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yep.
I had one house that I have no idea how long the hall bathtub drain wasn't hooked up. It just every time somebody showered or took a bath, it just all went underneath the house.
Cool.
Right.
and in that case, I had one of those, and the sellers were like, yeah, we've always done that. We're not fixing it. I'm like, wait a second. They're like, it's just gray water.
Yeah, but it's going under your house.
Yeah.
Right.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Oh my God.
That happens.
Yeah, I do get that. That is a funny thing. Is I'll go underneath a house and I'll see where sinks or bathtubs have been diverted into a gray water pipe. It's like, okay, that got capped and this goes over here, and so
Interesting.
I have to say that, right?
Right.
You know, I discovered it, so I have to disclose it. You know, and I don't know where it goes or anything, but I say that, you know, some things have been diverted. And
Yeah.
do your due diligence.
Yeah.
Do your due diligence.
Get a camera in there, figure it out.
Good luck.
Good luck to you. Yeah. You know, I want to go back to something that you mentioned when we were talking about just a second ago. You mentioned in February that you did an AC inspection because we had some hot weather.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, a common misunderstanding is that you can't test, and you can give me specifics, but you can't test the air conditioning in cold weather and you can't test the heating system in hot weather.
That's right.
And so people always, like, I've heard that a number of times where they're like, why? You know, fortunately for those buyers, like, you were able to test that AC system in February.
Right.
And they found out, but that's not always the case. And so, you know, come June and July when they turn that puppy on, it happens a lot.
It
right?
does. It does. And it's unfortunate, but you're right. I use a standard number of 65 degrees. If it's under 65 degrees outside, I cannot run the AC system. And if it's over 65 degrees outside, I can't run the heating system. That's a general principle. The numbers are actually a little bit different. They're actually 60 and 70, I believe. And an HVAC tech, when he's got gauges all hooked up to the system and whatnot, he can watch pressures and make sure things aren't over pressurizing or whatever. He can do that. I just pick a number of 65. If it's below that, I test the heat. If it's above that, I test the AC. It does. I can't even explain it all because it's very technical, but yes, it does put pressure on the system in an incorrect way, and it can damage the system.
Which is why you don't do it.
Which is why I don't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just think it's very, in that regard, I think it's just a great idea for buyers to either ask for the HVAC system to get serviced by a professional,
Yes.
like before or, you know, or during the transaction, or, you know, before they go and fire that puppy up, you know, for whatever season that they're in. Like, it's just something that needs to get done.
Agreed.
Because I can't tell you how many times that I get that call. You know,
It's like one of the single biggest, most expensive systems in a house.
yeah, I spent $18,000 on my new system.
Right. Wow. And what is it? What does a service and evaluation cost?
$100.
Yeah, $100.
Yeah.
Get it done.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also really important that people look into home warranties. You know, I don't pitch them, I don't do anything, but I think it's also really important if you know that it's the winter and you can't get your AC checked,
Right.
probably get a home warranty.
Right.
Right? It just makes so much more sense to be able to do that.
It does.
For sure.
And while we're on that, just so people understand, a heat pump system,
Okay.
which is a single system that does both heating and air conditioning, uses the same refrigerant, and when the refrigerant goes one way, it gets cold and it's your AC, and when it goes the other way, it gets hot and it makes your heat in the winter. So The only the only difference is between a heat pump and a split system in this regard is a reversing valve in the outdoor unit. And I can't see that. I don't know what that is. Typically, I can figure out if it's a heat pump or a split system. But so that's how it's just the opposite. When you reverse the flow of refrigerant, it makes it hot or cold.
Interesting.
A split system, just so people know, is literally split. There's an AC system which uses the heat pump outside, and there is a coil on the inside. Then for heating, it can be either, a split system technically is gas.
Okay.
So we use gas to heat, and we use the compressor system to cool. Within the air handler, there's basically two systems. Instead of having two fans, we're able to just use one fan.
Right.
So
which one's more efficient?
Ask the heating and cooling guy.
All right. Not that big of a nerd then, I guess. All right, Roger. Another pet peeve of yours. Tell me about hot water heaters.
Oh, really? They're called water heaters because you don't have to heat hot water, but you take cold water.
But you could.
You take cold water and you put it in this heater, and it comes out hot. So it's just a water heater.
Sorry.
No. I'm going to use that from now on. Roger, my hot water heater's broken.
I can't tell you how many times I've said that, and every time I say it, he's always, no! Water heater. Yeah, no, that's really funny.
Yeah.
Lasky, you got a good question over there written up as we're starting to wrap it up, and I want to kind of end with that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So, like, one of my favorite parts about these podcasts is I'm always learning. You know, like, I've been doing it a couple of years now, you know, and so I'm learning. Every day I learn more. But, like, what would you be something that you would like for both agents, you know, for agents to learn, to get out of it? What would you want them to know to, you know, help them be better agents, or even to save the seller and the buyer grief and money and whatnot?
Wow.
Told you, save that one for last.
Wow. Gosh, do you have a good answer for that one, Daniel?
No. Well, I mean, if you could give, like Robin's saying, if you could give a real estate agent one tip, like just one thing that you think would help them be better at their job, that would help them ease the mind of their buyer and seller, or make the process for their buyer and seller easier, like what would that be?
Don't get excited. You know, when you see something, when you hear about something, when you see something on a report, don't get excited. Just everything is fixable. Mm-hmm. You know, let's just look into this, see what it's going to take, and then wade through it. We can wade through it together. Mm-hmm. Call me. Always call me. You know, agent, you know, if you don't understand something, call me. I don't want you to have to get excited. I don't want you to have to cause anxiety in your buyer.
Yeah.
Which a lot of agents unfortunately transfer that over to their buyers or sellers, whether they realize it or not. You know, we use that phrase, you know, a lot, where the dog knows how the owner's feeling through the leash. Right. So we transfer that to our clients all the time, and it's our responsibility to be the shock absorber. Yeah. To be the dam that keeps the flow of water, you know, loosened or tightened up a little bit.
Right. And yeah, I can think of the agents that don't get excited. You know, they roll with this and whatnot, and their buyers are, you know, feel the confidence.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you get a lot of agents that don't read through the home inspection? They just like give it to the buyer. Here it is.
I don't feel like that.
That's good.
I feel very blessed to work with a lot of really good agents, and so I don't feel like that's a common thing at all.
Yeah. No, I think that's another good piece of advice, you know, by what you both are saying. I mean, you're absolutely right. We are the shock absorber. I mean, that is the good job. And that is what I think separates the good from the great, is the people who can manage those emotions. Right. In that case. But that's another thing that you said, is that you're very fortunate to work with good agents. And I think that could be the same for real estate brokers also. Like, I feel very blessed to have you not only as a friend, but as a home inspector and another professional in this industry. But those are relationships. We've built this relationship, you and I,
Right.
Over years. And I just think that people need to focus more on building those relationships. Build your team.
Right.
It doesn't have to be Roger Owen, the home inspector, or Dan Doyle, the lender.
Right.
If you have a team and that you figured out that you guys work well together and you guys try to improve and get better at your job, then you're going to be good, and you're going to be able to transfer that success, to your clients, your buyers and your sellers.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's I can't say that enough about my career. I just feel like I've been blessed with so many good people. But also at the same time, I've worked very hard to surround myself with good people.
Right.
And if I do get a home inspection and it's from an inspector that I don't enjoy or that is tough to deal with, I don't use them again.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I've built my team that way. Not my team as in the Bifano home team, but I'm talking about you and Dan and Vanessa Blacksmith and everybody else that I use on a very consistent basis. Yeah. And it's just because of those relationships. Like, surround yourself with good people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
People that'll go to bat for you.
Right.
I do want to make one just quick distinction. Like, us being the shock absorber doesn't mean the information doesn't get disseminated
Right.
to the clients, right? It's not holding back information. It's giving the information in a way that is appropriate for the situation.
Yes.
I tell my clients all the time, you don't need to panic. I'll tell you when you need to panic.
Right.
There you go.
Don't worry about it. I will sound the alarm from the mountaintops.
Yeah.
We will know that it's a fire drill.
Yeah.
Until then, cool your jets. We're good.
Right.
Yeah, it's as very simple as, you say on your home inspection report, like, the HVAC system is of certain age. I recommend that it gets serviced by a qualified professional. There's a very, very big difference between calling your clients and be like, oh my God, the thing's super old, we need to have it replaced, versus, hey, you know what? This is an old system. I think that we should have it serviced by an HVAC guy and just see what it is. And then if it looks like it needs to be replaced, then he can give us a quote for it. And then if the seller doesn't want to do it and you don't want to do it, then we're gone. And if not, we'll just ask and just see what happens.
Yep.
There's a big difference.
Yep.
It's
Huge. Yeah.
same information spread. It's just spread in a different way.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and that's one of the things that I've always appreciated you as an inspector, is that you talked about not making mountains out of molehills. Like, you're very easy about explaining that stuff. This is what it is. This is how you could potentially fix it. And, or it could be this, or it could be that, it's just it's not like, oh man, you need to get out of this contract.
Well,
I've had a home inspector tell me that before. You can't, you shouldn't buy this house.
Right.
Well, Roger made a very clear distinction when he said everything can be fixed, because it truly can. It's the amount of money that's associated with it.
Right.
But I'm on the same page with you. Everything can be fixed, especially on a home.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. It's true.
And so, back to a question you said earlier, I know we're kind of wrapping up, but
That's okay.
another reason to have a professional home inspector come out and look at the home is this. When you show up and you look at the home, you have emotions attached. You have all kinds of emotions attached. When your uncle comes and looks at it, or your son who's a contractor, there's still emotions attached because they're attached to you, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. When I show up, there is no emotions. Yeah. I am looking at that home as objectively as it could be looked at. Mm-hmm. And then you get the report and you look at it and you read it. But I don't have any emotion attached to this home. I hope it works out for you, but there's no emotion for me. Mm-hmm. So that in itself helps, allows for a much better objective look at the structure and report.
Right. It's beautiful. That's great advice. I love it.
Yep.
I dig it. Well, you guys have anything else?
Well, that was actually one of the questions that I had kind of lined up, is the family member who's going to go look through it, or the person that thinks they're a weekend warrior going to go look through it. You nailed that question.
Yeah.
I mean, that's perfect, because that's the problem, is they're going to come with their biases on looking at that home where you don't.
Yeah.
And if he's a home inspector, okay.
Right.
But if he's a contractor, that
he's
goes
a
back
roofer that's going to go inspect everything is the problem that I have.
Right. And even if he's a contractor, like a general, it was like I said at the beginning when I went up and took those tests. Wow, I had to look at everything from a different angle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
there's experience that comes with this. There
is.
Yeah. I mean, how much have you learned from in the last 8 years about houses?
Tremendous. If I were to build a house now, I would build it different than when I was a contractor doing it.
Right.
And I've looked at, I didn't even look up the number. I don't know, 3,000 houses or something. Okay, well, you start to learn some stuff after 3,000 houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. No, it's super invaluable stuff. And anyway, yeah. No, it's awesome. No, this is good, Roger. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. I love hearing you talk about houses. It's just your passion behind it is just pretty cool. And I just appreciate you sitting down with us and talking and trying to educate the folks out there who listen.
Well, he said trying to educate.
Well, we're trying. We are trying. Yeah.
That is one uphill climb.
Yeah. I don't worry about that part so much, like we're trying to, I learn a lot just from sitting here talking to the people that we talk to. And that's great. Selfishly, that's great. And then us just putting it out on the internet, I just think is for people to find, if they find it, they find it. If they don't, they don't. We try to do a good job at trying to, bring on quality people that have great knowledge and share that information. And that's about as much as I think we can do.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Well, thank you for having me here, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your team.
yeah, well, I love having you. So
Appreciate it.
anyway, that's a wrap, boys.
Sounds good.
All right.
See you guys.